someone who made India super proud on the world sport arena, quite unlike any sportsman or sports person even till today. I think it kind of opened the floodgates. So, like I like to paint a picture, I'm going to do that. The year was 2008. You need to go back so many years. Yeah, 15 years. The year was 2008. Just think of what you guys were doing. No Indian sports person had ever won an individual gold medal. And we thought कि ये तो नहीं होगा. इतने सालों से नहीं हुआ, अब भी नहीं होगा. Yeah, it looked bleak. And then in walked in a 26-year-old lad who had previously won. He had won lots of awards. He had won the Commonwealth Gold. He'd won the Major Dhyan Chand Khel Ratna Award, which is India's highest sports award. However, an Olympic medal had eluded him. In fact, everyone thought that he was going to win the gold or at least one medal in the previous Olympics, but it had eluded him. But with determination, with hard work and perseverance, he shot his way to India's first ever individual gold medal, the 10 meters air rifle event. Whoa, what a truly proud moment for each and every Indian. And that Indian is with us today on stage. Put your hands together and really rise in honor of Abhinav Bindra. We had Mr. India yesterday. I'm going to be addressing you as Mr. Gold. Yeah, Mr. Gold, Abhinav Bindra. Tell me, good evening and how are you? And you're looking fabulous.
Hello everybody, very nice to be here and to be amongst all of you today. I think the idea today is to just share some stories of my long career in sport. It was an interesting journey, full of ups and downs, but a tremendous learning. And whatever I learned on the field of play is going to stay with me for the rest of my life. I don't look back at those many years, at those medals that you were just alluding and talking to. I don't ever look at them even, but I look back really at those 22 years, for example, for the relationships that I was able to build. The relationships I was able to build with my mom and dad as a starting point, the relationships I built with competitors, the relationships I built with my coaches. Those are those wonderful memories that really I treasure.
So lovely. Let's go back in time then. I think one question that everyone would want to ask, and I'm sure if any kid, even in the room, in terms of their kids go up to the parents and say, yaar, hame to shooting mein, we want to kind of participate in the sport of shooting. I don't think anyone will take them seriously. So you need to tell us, how did this journey begin and the love for shooting, the sport that you're in?
Actually, I had a very reluctant start to sport. As a young kid, I actually hated sport. I was in a boarding school, and the only talent really I had in boarding school was to miss physical education classes in school. I was quite a fat chap, and I used to come up with the most creative of excuses day in and day out. Missing those classes. In boarding school, I used to receive a letter almost every day. And that letter was from my dad. And there was one thing common in that letter was to play sport. Of course, I didn't listen to him. Finally got out of boarding school, started going to a day school in Chandigarh. And I was introduced to my first shooting coach, Colonel Dhillon. And I went to my first formal shooting session under a mango tree, I remember, in 1995. And I fell in love with this sport from day one. I fell in love with it because to be somewhat successful in it, all I had to do was stand still, and there was no real running around needed. But that was the entry point. But to be successful at it, I of course had to then put in a lot of effort and hard work to convert my weakness as well into a strength. But that was it. That was the real start.
And I believe under the mango tree where there was a beehive or something on top, so you really had to stand still.
Absolutely. It was good training right from the beginning.
But
I didn't think of it that way. Maybe that's the secret of whatever little success I had.
But still, shooting, I mean, I'm just trying to think, everyone, I'm sure people in the room would have at some point of time taken up a sport. But really, the love for the sport where you're holding actually a gun or a rifle, and that then becoming a sport, or you treating it as a sport.
I think I also fell in love with the individual aspect of the sport. It's probably the most individual sport that really exists, right? And you really have to own your successes, you have to own your failures, and that was something, I was attracted to. And that's how probably I became a control freak also at some point of time. But it was really that individual nature where, I was in control of, if I'm going to succeed, it's in my hands. If I'm going to fail, I have to own it. So that was interesting. But of course, it was a difficult period in Indian sport at that time. There was not much infrastructure available. More so, there was no real knowledge available to get properly trained. So very early on, at the age of 12 or 13, I packed my bags with my mother and went to Germany and started training. So that was the start, and it was a very interesting time. I have one memory which I'll never forget. I used to live in a shooting school in Germany, and that time there were no cell phones. So my dad, there used to be one, those public phones with the coin in the ground floor of that building. And that was the only way to connect with him. So, but luckily that public phone had a phone number. So my dad used to call every day, and everybody in the building thought there was a fire alarm. But that is fantastic memories. But it was a great learning, right as a kid to really get into it, to travel the world. It gave me a great opportunity.
But what were the other learnings there? Because obviously, again, the challenge there, or my takeout there, is that you pulled yourself out from your comfort space, which was home, which was family, which was your parents, and you decided to go off to Germany and train at a school. That would have come with a lot of challenges and hardships also, right? And what was that all about? Because it's not like, you could just go back home and, you have a team there. It's everything is, it's about yourself. It's about things that you do on your own. And of course, initially it would have taken them to form a relationship with you. So tell us a little bit about that journey.
See, frankly, I didn't think of it as a challenge. It was just something that I signed up for. It's just something that I had to do. So for me, it was not really a problem. I never thought of it as if I'm missing out on something. Because a lot of people ask me, you missed your childhood. When everybody was having fun, you were training. But nobody put a gun to my head to do this. So this was really what I wanted to do. And I really never looked at these 20-odd years of my sporting career as any sacrifice that I've made. Yes, there were challenges and there were difficult times. Food at that time was a very big issue. Yeah. And in this shooting school, there was this really strict person. And if you didn't finish this German food, which I wasn't really fond of at that time, he used to get very angry. So sometimes I couldn't just put it down my throat. So I had to wrap sometimes food in a tissue paper and put it in my mother's handbag just to get away. But it was fun. And really, when I look back at it, it was the formation of the relationship I have with my mother. Because, it was such a lonely sort of a time. This shooting school was in the middle of a forest. And I think the next village was maybe 7-8 kilometers away. And there was really nothing to do. And the only entertainment we had was to talk to each other. But that was absolutely wonderful. And sport gave me that opportunity to form this bond, to form this lovely relationship. And that is what I'm so grateful about.
Yeah, we're going to open the house too, like we did yesterday, and we can get people, but not right now. Not. अच्छा, ओहो, सर आपकी प्रोफाइल, हाँ, अब ठीक है. Actually, आप इनसे बात कीजिए, मैं आपसे बात करूँगा. Let it be a two-way directional thing. So, Abhinav, also then coming back to that, and I'm sure everyone is curious, and so am I. What is training, or what is the day in the life of a shooter as a sport? I mean, how many hours do you need to practice? What kind of focus do you need? How do you decide that you are getting somewhere? Is it competition itself, or is there some kind of formula? Because, I mean, as kids, all of us at home, wo bottle pe goli mari, wo bottle gir gayi, to we are all great, right? I mean, that's how it used to be. And then someone would say, yeah, you should become a shooter, yeah, because, you know, you're able to knock down the bottles. But I'm saying it's not that simple. It's a science, it's a sport. So tell us about that, a day in the life of a shooter.
It was 7 to 8 hours of training every day. I used to wake up in the morning at 6 o'clock. My day started with a run in the morning. Ironically, I had to start running. And that is how it started. Then after a little breakfast, I went to shoot. I had a first training session, which ended at probably from 8:30 to about 12:30. It was my first shooting session. A little break for lunch. Then after lunch, my second shooting session. Then after that, I would go back to the gym, train in the gym for another hour or so. Then there was mental training. So it was a full day, 7 to 8 hours, morning till night. And that is what I did, 22 years. You know, you were asking me a little bit about my childhood and you know, my start. I think what was also interesting was that I really did not have much talent. I was a fat boy, unathletic, no coordination, not competitive in nature. I did not have that, you know, killer instinct needed to go out and win and face competition. It was something that I had to learn. But I had very bad eyes. You know, for shooting, you have to also see the target, but eyes are very weak and continue to be weak. But I had one talent, and my talent was my ability to work hard, my ability to show up every day. My ability to show up every day. I really fell in love with the process of shooting. I fell in love with the boring and the mundane, because falling in love with the boring and mundane is what actually gets you success. It's really about doing the day-to-day with efficiency, bringing the right energy into practice day in and day out. Yes, the Olympics came once in 4 years for me, for athletes, but for me really, the Olympics were every day. I had to be better than what I was yesterday. And with that mindset is what I led those 22 years, frankly.
22 years, yeah. So, but in this journey, of course, the Olympics was a milestone, but you were already achieving so much greatness before that. You were winning contests. What was this special relationship with the Olympics? And of course, I've also heard how you were disappointed in, I mean, there were 2 Olympics before that, and you know, one you were the youngest, and then there was one where you were touted to kind of get a medal home, and things didn't happen, and then 2008 happened. So tell us this relationship, this lovely relationship you've had with the Olympics.
So of course the Olympics is the epitome of sporting success, and that is what, as a 13-year-old boy, I set this very lofty goal that I want to go out there and win the Olympic Games. But maybe I'll talk a little bit about that time between 2004 and 2008. You know, at the 2004 Olympics, I probably suffered the greatest failure of my life. This was in Athens at the Games, where in the qualification competition, I had broken an Olympic record. And I went into the final in 3rd place. And to win a medal on that particular day, I had to shoot 10 very ordinary shots. I just ended up shooting the 10 worst shots of my life. A few days after my event got over, they realized that the floor I was standing on had a loose tile underneath, which moved every time I picked up the rifle. So in a sport which is all about millimeters and all about stability, it was impossible to perform well. Of course, this made me very disappointed. I was bitter, I was unhappy, I was depressed. But then after a few days, when things calmed down and with time you start to heal, I went back to training. It was, you know, I started missing training again because I loved that process of shooting. I went back to training, and you know what the first thing I did when I went back to training? I installed a loose tile in my shooting range, and I started practicing on it. But really, you know, my whole Athens was also, you know, was path-breaking in many ways for me, in the sense that it changed my mindset to a great degree. It changed my mindset into 2 or 3 ways. Number one, up until Athens, I was a very outcome-driven person. When I went to Athens, I wanted to win a gold medal. That was the ambition. And then Athens happened, this incident happened, this disappointment happened. From being a very outcome-driven person, I became very detached from outcomes. Okay. and very, very invested in the process. It was all about the details.
There's a lot to learn here, yeah, guys.
It was all about the details. It was all about doing the small things right. It was all about exploring on what I can do better to get that 0.1% edge. So this was a very fascinating 4 years because I also ended up doing some very interesting things to become better. And I'll probably tell you a few things that I did. You know, to become mentally in a better performer, you know, I got my brain mapped. So I went to a laboratory in South Africa, and I shot in this laboratory. They had me 32 areas of my brain had sensors, so they were monitoring brain activity while I shot 10,000 shots in this laboratory. After shooting those 10,000 shots, they then found a pattern that when I was shooting very well, what sort of brain activity I had. And then through technology, I was also able to replicate and get into that state of mind. So that is something I did. Then for mental training, I would meditate and visualize in Samadhi tanks. Samadhi tanks are flotation tanks which have 1,000 kgs of Epsom salt, so you lie absolutely weightless. And that is the best way to visualize. So I would spend hours and hours in this dark Samadhi tanks and then visualizing how I would feel when I was in Beijing. And I would try and visualize each shot several hundreds times even before I got there. Then my shoes, you know, I had this incident in Athens with this floor situation. So I got my shoes soled with rubber, which was used in Ferrari tires, because at that point of time, they had the most anti-skid properties. You know, ammunition is something very, very critical for my sport. And, you know, at that time, the Chinese used to manufacture the best ammunition. But of course, they didn't sell it to anybody else. So I got a friend in Hong Kong to buy me some. And then, very creatively, we changed the packaging of this ammunition. And then we shipped it to India. So I also had to become a borderline smuggler in this whole process. So I was this fat boy, and there were some areas in my body where I just couldn't lose fat. And my love handles were one area. And that affected my stance. So I went to Australia and got my love handles lasered off. So that I did. I went to a sports dentist, and I didn't even know a sports dentist existed. And they then saw my upper and lower jaw, and they created a kind of a denture, which when I wore it, the balance of my upper and lower jaw was perfect, which meant that my neck rotation was a few degrees more, which gave me a slight advantage. So at age 25, I was also wearing dentures, by the way. You know, this Beijing shooting hall was a massive space. It was probably 100 times bigger than this hall. And that, for a shooting performer, is difficult because it's all about balance. It's all about getting reference point in the hall to find your body in space, to orient. So there was no real way to really get ready for this. So what I did was I hired a marriage hall in Chandigarh, and I converted that into a shooting range. And that, by the way, is the closest I've ever come to any sort of marriage. I then learned breathing exercises from a free diver, because, you know, they have to go down in water without oxygen. So they have special breathing techniques. So I learned those. Then just a few days before going to Beijing, I went on a commando training course. And this was a risky thing to do because you know, you could get injured very easily. But it was important for me to push myself out of my comfort zone. And, you know, this experience was very frightening. It was a very tough 2-3 hours in this commando course. But after I finished it, I said to myself, if I could do this, winning a medal cannot be that tough. So I did this as well. And I'll end with, and I'll probably end with one story which you probably have seen on social media, which you were wanting to ask me about.
Yes, please.
So I I did scientific things, as you saw, but there was also madness in my pursuit. So just before I was boarding my flight to Beijing and I was checking out of my hotel room in Munich because I was training there, I crossed the mini bar of my hotel room and I stole 2 miniature bottles of Jack Daniels. And I was not even a big drinker. No? I was not even a big drinker. And I packed them in my toilet kit. And I don't know why I did it. I was just anticipating fear and I was anticipating a panic attack. And the night before my Olympic final, I had a panic attack and I wasn't able to sleep. And then I thought back to my 2 miniature bottles of Jack Daniels and I went to the toilet, opened my toilet kit, had those little 2 miniatures, and next day, gold medal.
So, dentures chodo, scuba diving chodo. So for tomorrow to prepare yourselves, getting back into work on Monday, Sunday night. Cheers. I mean, whichever brand, but whatever gets your goat, but cheers.
But I have one regret. I should have chosen a better quality of whiskey at least.
Wow. I mean, of course, it's literally like traveling the world, right? Something in South Africa, there's scuba diving, there's commando, and all of us, and what we think is just stand there and, it's just...
सोचा तो मैंने भी था, but it turned out differently.
Wow. And when did you feel, now of course, you've gotten us the gold, and there would have been a life before that and life after that. Can you take us to the life before that? You as a person, you as a sportsman, people's approach towards you, your approach towards people, and then of course, after the gold.
Maybe I'll talk a little bit about failure and success and dealing with both. I think, as I told you all, I think my life is really about failure because I failed much more than I succeeded. And I think it is all about learning to fail well. I think it is really the art of letting go of the unwanted baggage failure brings, because failure brings that disappointment and that negative energy, and you have to have the ability to get over it and move on. But it is also one's ability to learn from each experience. And that is what I try to do every time. It was all about getting back as soon as possible, learning from that experience and trying to get better. Day in and day out, day in and day out. And that is pretty much what I did. Success, of course, also comes with its own challenges. And to be very honest, although I failed much more, when I actually succeeded in Beijing, it was actually my biggest crisis. My biggest crisis came when I won. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. Firstly, up until Beijing, for about 16 years of my life, I had only one goal and one desire. That was win a gold medal at the Olympic Games. I would go to bed with this dream that I want to win a gold medal. And I would wake up trying to make this dream a reality. And one fine day, this was achieved. This gold medal was in my pocket. I was all dressed up with nowhere to go. I had a sudden loss of motivation. And I was very, very confused on what should I do next now. This is what I had oriented my life towards, and now it's over. And this was a very difficult time. Very, very flat time. How did I overcome this? I ended up going on a Vipassana meditation course. You go to Vipassana, and I went to Vipassana really wanting to find my new calling in life, because at that time I was like, I should give this up now and I want to move on to something else, but I really did not know what I should move on to. So I go to Vipassana, where I'm supposed to meditate 10 hours a day in silence and for 10 days. And all I did for 10 days was think back to shooting and how I could get better, what I could do better in practice. And that really gave me a realization that I loved the process of shooting. And that energized me so much to go back to more. So that really is what it re-emphasized my belief that the process is the biggest reward. What I also learned, I think, and I think which is relevant to all of you, is energy management. When you fail and when we succeed, I think one thing we do very badly is we dehumanize our pursuit. At the end of the day, we are all human beings. Yes. And when we face failure or when we face success, it is also extremely draining, emotionally, physically, mentally. And I think we have to take care of ourselves better. So I think an easy thing for everybody to do is just keep an energy journal, for example, right? Every day, it'll take 5 seconds to just note how you're feeling, mentally, physically, emotionally. And when you have 10 days in a row where there's a red flag, you have to do something, because managing success or managing failure, it is also about preventing a slump. You don't want to deal with a slump, right? You want to prevent it. And energy management is something which is very important. I think when you do have success, I think another mistake that two mistakes one can do, and I learned from it because I also experienced this, I'm only an ordinary human being. You climb a mountain and you climb the peak, and then human nature is that you want to jump to the next peak. But that never happens. You have to climb that peak down, plug the holes in the foundation, and then step by step climb up again. That requires energy. So managing your energies is very important. The second part of managing success is that I think a mistake that is made is that you end up you think that you've succeeded in one way, and you just simply want to repeat that process. But that never works, because everything has changed. The environment around you has changed. You yourself have changed. You evolve. We all keep evolving as human beings. Our perceptions keep changing. Our mindset keeps changing, and we have to continuously embrace change. We have to continuously adapt to change. We have to adapt to the changing environment around us, but also adapt to the changing human being that we are. So I think these are the little learnings that I had from dealing with failure and dealing with success. They both come with their own unique sets of challenges.
But you mentioned about balancing energy, but after winning, there's just so much more energy management you need to do, even with the external world, right? I mean, suddenly everyone wants a slice of you, they want your time, there's endorsements, wherever you go, there's that Vipassana space is not there, because there's always, a camera on you, there's always a scanner on you, and that would also then, does that heighten the pressure? Because it's not just about climbing the mountain down. Now when you're climbing that mountain, there is a lot more, there's a lot more baggage that's been built around it. How did you handle that?
I think at the end of the day, of course, external expectations weigh on you. I mean, there's no running away from it. It is just the reality of life. I mean, if you say that don't care about the external world, well, then you're not living in this world. But I think the most important thing is managing your own expectations. That, I think, is even more critical than managing external expectations. You have to have the ability to look yourself in the mirror before you go to bed and ask yourself the question, have I given it my best today? And on days when you will have a good night's sleep. And I think at the end of it, that is really the most important way on dealing with expectations, setting your own benchmarks and going after them with honesty, with determination, and with integrity. And I think that is the only way that you can really work with expectations. You touched upon pressure.
Yeah.
And I want to talk a little bit about dealing with pressure, because that is something I never really dealt with well. You all think that I have this calm persona, and I think many people think I'm a very calm person, but that is a complete lie. I was just faking it for the 20 years, because I never had calmness. I was always assailed with an extreme amount of anxiety every time I went to compete. It's a lonely pursuit, this shooting sport, very lonely sport. But I had one companion in these 22 years. You know who my companion was? No. My companion was self-doubt, because I never really had confidence. I never really had that belief. But I had one transformational moment in my life when, instead of chasing self-belief, which I really tried to work hard on, I worked with psychologists, trainers, this, that, and the other, became bankrupt just feeding them, but nothing really worked. But there was one day which was when things just changed. That was the day when instead of chasing self-belief, I started chasing self-respect. And how did I achieve self-respect? I achieved self-respect by, again, looking myself into that mirror and asking myself that question, have I done my best today? Really making sure that I do my best every day. Apart from the Jack Daniels, before I boarded that flight to Beijing, I asked myself the question, did I put in my best the last 4 years? Could have I done anything more to prepare for these Olympic Games? And that day, the answer was no. I could have done nothing more humanly possible. And even before I shot my first competition shot in Beijing at those Olympic Games, I had already won. I had won in my own eyes. And that was very, very powerful. And that is how I dealt with pressure.
But did that help you in the next Olympics when things didn't go the way that you would have expected? Because, I mean, yes, you're facing the mirror and you are talking to yourself, but there is also now the expectations of 1 billion people on you where they don't know the process. They just think you'll walk in and you'll just win us another medal. So that expectation with the outside world and not being able to fulfill that, does that have an impact on you? Or by that time you've already reached your Zen?
No, there's nothing called Zen and all that stuff. I'm a human being, man. Where's the Zen? No, I think another thing what I learned in my sports career was acceptance. You have to learn to accept things. You know, as human beings, we resist things too much. And yes, at the next Olympic Games, I failed. And you have to accept it that you screwed up when you didn't do the best that I could. And accepting it. Being kind to yourself. But accepting it. Acceptance is, I think, a very, very important thing. The sooner you accept the good or the bad, the sooner you're able to move on. And that is what I did. And this is something that doesn't come every day. It doesn't come as a on and off switch. It's something that you have to practice. And this is something that I started practicing when dealing with pressure. Firstly, to deal with pressure and to deal with this self-doubt, I had to accept it. For the longest period of time, I was only resisting it, right? I was trying to run away from it. But the moment I accepted it, I was able to just deal with it and coexist with it. And yes, when I failed, you accept it. You accept your shortcomings. I mean, we're all human beings. We're not perfect. We're not robots. And that acceptance came, and then very soon I started training for my next Olympic Games. And my last Olympic Games were in Rio. And that, by the way, is probably my greatest performance. I ended up fourth, a tenth of a point away from another medal, but it is probably the performance I am absolutely most proud of because I had my self-respect again. I spent the next 4 years trying to be the best that I could, and I couldn't have done anything more. It just happened that there were 3 more people a little bit better than me on that particular day. But I had my own pride, and that gave me great closure to my career because there was an absence of regret. And as athletes, we are chasing medals, we are chasing outcomes, but the greatest thing that we chase is an absence of regret.
I mean, again, going back to 2008 and what a moment it was. And, prior to that, I think India had won, 2 or 3 individual medals at the Olympics. And post that, suddenly the floodgates had opened. There were some 14 to 16 medals. The second gold happened, individual gold. I mean, do you feel proud of it that probably somewhere it gave hope, it gave a vision to so many sports people. Also, I think to, the Olympic body where they said, yes, we are capable. This one man has kind of done it, what we've been trying to do for many years. And after that, really, there's been no turning back at the Olympics. Now, our expectations are a lot higher. Initially, it was, ek medal mil jaye to acha hai. But, I mean, right now, it's, people are hoping 5, 6, 7, 8, every Olympics. So, do you feel good about it? I mean, I believe that you've been responsible for this turning point in Indian sport.
I can't take full credit for it, but I think what it did change to a degree was the aspiration of our athletes. I think, when I was competing for a long time, before we even boarded that flight to an Olympic Olympic Games, our Olympic team, people had already written us off. And now when and for us athletes, sometimes I know athletes who just happy to just compete at an Olympic Games. But now when you talk to an Indian athlete, they want to win. They just don't want to win a medal. They want to win a gold medal. And they're demanding more of themselves. They're aiming much higher. They're aspiring higher. And I think perhaps my achievement helped that in a little tiny way.
And any other sportsmen, sports people, that you've met who've inspired you? I mean, you would have got the opportunity of meeting so many more in different fields, your own field, some other field, and something about that meeting or something about that meet that inspired you.
No, I'm inspired by every athlete. It's very difficult to name one person. I'm just inspired by athletes who wake up every morning, whether it be an athlete doing weightlifting in an early morning in Patiala that you've never even heard of. Everybody's trying to overcome their own limitations, and I have great regard and great respect for every athlete who competes. They're all trying to do their best, and it's very, very, very inspiring. At an Olympic Games, there are 10,000 athletes who compete from across the world. Only 300 go back with medals or gold medals. And look at that ratio. That doesn't mean that the others are not good. So while we only look at that achievement and we only look at the people who win, there are many success stories and great human stories in each one of those athletes, and I have great admiration and respect for the whole community.
Spoke about pressure, and I'm sure the house here at large. I mean, high pressure jobs. What advice would you want to give to everyone? Because of course it's individual. Some of them are individuals. Some of them are part of organizations. They have to go back home. There are expectations. There are daily pressures. Of course, you've seen pressure at a very different level where the entire country is looking at you, but a pressure is pressure, and these are high pressure jobs.
I talked a little bit about acceptance. I think that accepting and learning to work with pressure, I think not running away from it, but learning to coexist with pressure, I think is an important thing. Maybe I'll talk about a different element because we talked a lot about pressure already. I achieved many goals in my career. I won the Olympics, I won the World Championships, I won several medals at the Commonwealth Games, Asian Games, blah, blah, blah. But I did not achieve my fullest potential. And I failed there. And now that I have an opportunity to look back a little bit, I attribute that failure of mine to a lack of balance that I had in my life. And probably each one of you also have a degree of lack of balance. You've all heard the word work-life balance. Very hard, it's a nice thing to say, but very, very hard to actually achieve. But believe me, it is something that you need to prioritize to a certain degree, because you cannot put all your eggs in one basket. You have to learn to take care of yourselves. You have to learn to humanize your pursuits, because that is what is going to get you to be at your best day in and day out. We are all human beings at the end of the day. Human well-being has to be at the heart and center of performance. And you're all high performers in your given field. So humanizing that, having a degree of balance in life, I think is absolutely critical if you want to achieve your fullest potential.
Great. You've got a book. I believe the book's now going to be made into a movie. Are you playing yourself? Because usually I know a lot of sports people turn into acting. Have you ever considered that? Are you playing yourself in the film? Is someone else playing you? What's the story behind that?
When do we get it? I'm too. No, I'm not playing myself. But your guest yesterday is Mr. Kapoor. Anil Kapoor is making my film. I don't know if I'll go. I will have the courage to go and watch my own film because I would imagine that my film will end up becoming a very loosely adapted version of my book, which you spoke about. So if you want to know my true story, read the book. If you are looking for some entertainment, go watch the movie. I'd recommend you to do both.
Okay, before we wind up, a quick rapid fire. So let's have fun here. Favorite cricketer?
Sachin Tendulkar.
Yeah. And India's chances of winning the World Cup?
50-50.
No.
रियलिस्टिक रहो ना भाई,
अच्छा।
पहले ही बोल दो जीतेंगे, फिर नहीं जीतेंगे फिर सब रोग है.
फिर सब बोलेंगे. Favorite food or cuisine?
I love Thai food.
Yeah. Any favorite restaurant back home or घर का खाना?
Of course, with all the travel, घर का खाना is something I always.
Favorite actor, actress?
I had the great privilege of meeting Mr. Amitabh Bachchan this afternoon, so I was very
okay.
privileged to meet him, and I was very inspired by his humility. So definitely, he's my favorite actor.
We had the privilege of meeting his granddaughter, तो हम वहाँ तक पहुँचे हैं अभी. But and favorite actress?
Oh, several. Kareena Kapoor.
And
Katrina Kaif.
हाँ, वही मैं सोच रहा था several हैं तो. What about movies? Any film that you wouldn't, whenever you're, like I say, you spend a lot of time with yourself, you're at home alone and you just want to watch a movie, which is that go-to movie for you which you can watch?
So there's one movie which is really stuck in my mind. It's a sports movie called Miracle. It's about the ice hockey team.
Yes.
And I really loved it, and it always it inspired me in a dark phase of my career. So that is something I really love. I do watch quite a lot of Bollywood movies, but problem वहाँ है कि अगले दिन याद नहीं रहता क्या देखा.
Okay, the last two things. One thing that, and I think that's going to be an inspiration for everyone, one thing that you do not compromise on no matter what.
Integrity.
And one activity that you do daily, again, without fail, in terms of any activity that you do, whether it's at home, with your sport, with your... What?
Practicing gratitude, because we take life for granted many times. So I practice gratitude every day.
So guys, here we are with one of the finest sports people we have ever met. And he's really, I think the life lessons that he's given us are absolutely magical. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Abhinav Bindra. Thank you. Avi, I'd like to request you to please join us on stage and give a little token. The Franklin Templeton Perspectives 2023 gift hamper to Abhinav.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.